Hey guys, another episode here on the Forester XT. Today we're going to be looking at fuel lines. So previously we had taken care of our brake lines over here. Now we're going to focus on getting some of the fuel lines run. You can see that I still have this kind of floating for the time being. I need to finish up the other brake lines coming under the car and tie them in there. But I also need to figure out some stuff with fuel lines at the same time. So now's the time when I'm going to kind of dive into this. So I'm not going to be doing a stock setup fuel system before. I was having some issues where I think most of the evap lines and such were just getting old and dry rotted. And in cold weather, you would actually smell fuel at idle, which was kind of bad. So in addition to smelling the fuel underneath the car way back there, where those fuel lines were rotting out, I was also getting kind of a raw fuel smell while it was idling. And I did some research, and apparently when the fuel lines and all the hoses and everything under the intake manifold here get old and crusty, they don't hold seals as well, and especially when they're cold, they can kind of just leak some fuel vapors and such. So we're going to do something different here. Currently the fuel system comes in stock, goes down and around to the fuel rail down there. And so what happens is all the fuel pressure goes to cylinder 4 first, then 2, and then it crosses over and goes to 1 and 3. And what ends up happening is that, especially in high horsepower builds with these engines, you end up with way less fuel pressure by your last cylinder before it hits the return going back to the tank. So I'm going to do what's referred to as a parallel fuel setup, where my fuel lines, as I mentioned, are going to run underneath the car. They'll come up and then split off and hit up 4 and 3, then 2 and 1, and that'll mean that both banks are getting hit with their own supply of fuel. Keeps it more consistent at high RPMs and such. So yeah, let's get this intercooler off, because that's in my way of doing everything there, and then I'll jump into figuring out how I'm going to be running my fuel lines through that little area down through there. Because the intercooler is just entirely in my way. There we go. Now I can see. So this is the area that I was talking about before where the lines are going to come up. And now that there isn't the big intercooler in my way, I can actually kind of see what's going on back here. I also have to start thinking about pulling the master cylinder here and the brake booster so I can get back here and get the old fuel lines out of the car. But the new ones are going to be coming up right through here. And now that this is all open, I can really see what I'm doing, which is perfect. So when I'm talking about fuel lines, I'm coming over now to my little table with all of the different hardware that I've accumulated for this project. This is what's left of that 25-foot roll we saw previously. I've got my braided AN lines, 2 sections of -6. This is the 1/4-inch aluminum hard line. This is for the evap solid line that's going to run under the car. And then this here is my 5/16 stainless hard line. This is going to make up the section of all the pressurized fuel lines going underneath the car. So when we're talking about the brake line, which was this stuff that's running under there, I've got 2 sections going along for the rear lines. Then I'm going to have 1 line of this aluminum 1/4-inch stuff going, again, evap, and then there's going to be the supply and the return, so 2 of the 5/16 lines here too. So I'm going to need to figure out how to cram all that stuff in, make like a little wire chase that all fits in. Starting to get happy with where my template is for the chase for all these tubes. I've got the rear piece kind of mocked up here. This guy's a little flappy, but no big deal. Things are hanging a little loose right now. In reality, it's going to sit more like that, which means I've actually kind of matched that angle in the frame there. I did some measurements and I made sure that the tubes will actually fit through this. So everything's looking pretty good with this. And I'm probably going to look at making this into sheet metal at some point. I don't think I have a piece that'll be quite long enough for this, but I can always take a longer, or take two shorter pieces and spot weld them in the middle and kind of combine them into make them one big piece. So we started out with a cardboard template, and now we've moved on to our metal pieces. Just some sections of 24 gauge I had sitting around. Actually the same exact sheet that I cut the patch holes for the back body with. In this case I just again cut it on the bandsaw and then put on all of my lines that I put on my template as to where I'm going to be bending stuff. And I left notes for myself so I know exactly how I'm going to be shaping stuff here, because this is super important. If you're not paying attention and you fold something the wrong way, you got to start over. So I don't want to do that, not wasting any time. And in fact, I've even made my notes very self-explanatory. This way, bend at 90. This way, bend at 90. But even better is if I do start to fuck it up, oh look, there's a note to myself saying, hey, should probably flip it over and bend it the other way. And I'll double check this underneath the car too to make sure. So that's super helpful. You may also notice that these are actually two separate pieces. As I had alluded to before, I didn't have a piece of metal sitting around that was actually this long. So what I did instead was I took what I did have and laid the template on it, drew in kind of my split line, and that's this edge here. And then I took this guy, you can't see it on this side of course, because the notes should be on the side you can see. This is my overlap between the two panels, so I can take these two guys, lay them on top of each other. I think this one's on the bottom, and I'll just put maybe a couple tacks along this edge, drill a couple holes to do some plug welds, make sure that's on there nice and good, but of course it's not like super structural, so I don't need to be laying huge stringer beads. So yeah, with that, I think let's get it over to the brake and get these things shaped. So this is the piece set up in the brake here. This is just a simple, cheap little Northern Tool brake that I got to do a job, actually one of the jobs on the Maslow, forming up like a little aluminum generator panel. It does the job pretty well for thin sheet metal, including steel like this one. And all it really is a couple pieces of angle here and underneath the top anvil here, which is just a big piece of bar. You clamp that down to hold the piece in place. You line up your bend, and then just take your handle. A little tricky doing it one-handed. And you bend it roughly 90-ish. I think that was a little under, but not bad for doing it one-handed. So I can always grab a, I got a brake out on the bench and I don't even have a square on hand. Give me a second. Now that's more like it. So if I take a square and run along this edge, it actually does look pretty good. I can see in one area over here, I don't think this clamp is on quite tight enough because that looks like that slipped. But that's something you could fix on the anvil or whatever with a hammer real quick. So that's a nice and quick 90-degree fold. So I'm going to do the rest of these up and get this all shaped. So that took a little bit of sheet metal forming, but I've got this whole piece now shaped up. And it's still sagging in the middle because I haven't had a chance to tack weld them. One of the nice things about leaving this as two pieces is that I've actually been able to adjust my overall length a little bit, because it may be hard to see from this angle. Bonk, I just whacked my head. So you can see from this angle here that I actually have like a nice little pocket now coming out the side where all of my lines will feed out. And I took them out just for fit up's sake, but they'll come through here, so that's the brakes, fuel supply, fuel return, and evap come through this section and up into the pocket underneath the gas tank. So having that little bit of adjustability in the length has given me the ability to fine tune exactly where this will sit in and out, which is kind of nice. So with these pieces now on the car, I've gone ahead and transferred where the tabs are that were on, or that are on this cover, all the way going up, so that I know where exactly those will be placed. And this one in the middle, I actually hadn't ground out any of the body coating yet, so I'm going to have to grind that out a little bit. And actually, now that we're up here, you can see with this cover panel, it took a little bit of work to get this to fit the body line just right. You can kind of see there's a complex curve going on. The frame rail here kind of has a bow to it going this way, I realized. And also I kind of had to take this and blend in a little bit of an angle to mate up with the line going there. And so that actually looks nice and clean now, which is really good. And it covers up that little hole that the lines are all going through, so that that's all a clean install. You can't see it. I'll make up another one up in the front after these two, but getting these two situated has been really important because I want to get this all painted and squared away before I actually run all of my lines going up the body. So with this undercover now fabbed up and ready to go, the next thing to figure out is kind of the fastening system for this. And I already figured out that on, we remove this real quick. So what I'm going to do to fasten on this side, because it's blind and I've got space underneath this cavity, is I'm going to put a thread cert right in there. And that will give me just like an M6 to go right in, secure it, the factory-ish kind of way. I think that's the cleanest way to do it. But I only want to use a fastener up here because this is my floor. So I don't want anything really poking through there if I can help it. I mean, a couple riv nuts may not be the worst thing in the world. But what I've kind of devised, so this here is a location where one of the tabs meets up with the body. And when I mention the tabs, they are this guy here, which is a little tab that I've left in the metal so that it can mechanically fasten to the body. And I made up these little straps that kind of go over it. So up on the body, this strap will go like this and get spot welded in two places. The only thing is I need to make a little bit of a hoop to account for the thickness of this tab here. So I've kind of devised a clever little solution for this. So let's go over to the bench. This is my test piece here. And so this is just one of these strap pieces again that I was showing you under the car. But I've put a little bit of a bow in it in the middle, actually just about the thickness of this material. So if I take one of these and kind of simulate that tab, you'll see it goes in nice. And I got a little bit of wiggle room, which accounts maybe for some paint, or I'll just kind of make this piece a little more springy, and I give it a little swoop or something. And this is just pinch clamped onto my brake just to kind of mock it up. So if we go over to the anvil now, you can see how this is done. Now this is kind of some old school blacksmithy stuff. And I've got one of my strap pieces here, and then this is my die effectively, which is just another piece of the same thickness metal, a little wider. If I take this guy, you'll see it's a little wider than the tab, so it gives it some wiggle room to go back and forth. Then you take your piece and center it, and I may have to switch over to the tripod here because I'm out of hands. 1 second. Okay, so what I'm doing is I'm just going to center my piece here over my die, and then just take my hammer and very carefully take the cross peen side specifically and crease it right where the edge of that metal is. Then I take the flat side and I work this tab out so it's not quite so ugly. It's under the car, so it's not super critical that that's pretty. But then we just rinse and repeat on the other side. Again, we position our piece. And right now what I'm doing is I'm actually lining this crease up with a back edge so I kind of have a sense of what my thickness is going to be. And again, very carefully, not trying to hit my fingers. and just shape that piece. Alright, so in very quick fashion, I have now made 4 of these little tabs here, and all of them have this profile in them so that they'll all accept a piece underneath them and serve as a good slot. Now this is starting to look like something. So, as opposed to previous shots, I now have this actually mostly mounted. I've got my tab here, and on the end secured. The one in the middle is kind of hanging loose. I'm not sure if that's going to line up or not because my line ended up deviating from the body a little more than I had intended. But even as it is, this is already super sturdy. So I throw some riv nuts along this back edge, and we should be fine. Also, we have a new panel formed up. This is the front half of this cover plate, and again, it's just kind of the same sort of method, and I've only got one tab that holds this one on, just that guy there, and this guy actually kind of fucked up and put it in the wrong spot, but I just moved it and welded it and all that, and those are the hanging straps that I'm using that you saw me form on the anvil. So this whole piece just kind of slides over it and hangs on that, and then I'll put probably 2 screws on this one to hold it against the frame. So those cover plates are pretty much there. I'm very happy with how this is coming out. So next thing to do now is to finish cleaning up the body, get that painted, and get ready to actually run the lines through. So with that, I'm just going to slap a couple coats of POR under the car, get all that bare metal covered up, and we'll regroup to do the lines under the car. I'd like to take a second and thank the new wave of supporters I got from Rich Rebuilds. It was really great seeing everybody take such an interest in all the things I do here on the channel, and also I had some really great conversations with people in the chat. And from some of those, I have some ideas now for some future content, so keep an eye out for that. So make sure to like, share, subscribe, all the usuals, you know. Comment if you feel so inclined. Any activity on this counts as engagement, and that helps this channel grow. So I'll catch you guys all next time.